I gave my entire life to that company. 30 years of sweat, sacrifice, and sleepless nights. But when the board brought in a young, smiling CEO who preached change, my own employees, men and women whose mistakes I'd quietly buried, whose families I'd fought to protect, turned their backs on me overnight. They cheered when he slashed my salary in half, laughed as if I'd become some relic in my own empire. And when cracks appeared in the new CEO's perfect image, when whispers of fraud began swirling, I saw my chance. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I handed the truth to the board and stepped back, calm as the storm I'd just unleashed. They reinstated me. My betrayers? They're scattering, scrambling for new jobs. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment, letting me know where you are viewing from. Kindly hit the like and subscribe to hear more real stories about family loyalty and betrayal. They might just change how you see your own relationships. My name is Cliff Robison. I'm 55 years old, and for more than 2 decades, I carried the weight of a company on my shoulders. People saw me as tough, maybe even cold, but those who worked closest to me knew the truth. I demanded discipline, yes, but I also protected my people like they were family. If someone's child got sick, I bent rules to give them time off. When mistakes happened that could have cost careers, I quietly erased the trail and took the blame. I wasn't perfect, but I was loyal, and I believed loyalty would be returned. That belief nearly broke me. For years, the board leaned on my experience. I was the man who kept the ship steady in storms, who turned losses into profit. But age is a cruel mirror. At some point, my gray hair and slower stride became symbols of yesterday. The board wanted fresh blood, new ideas, a modern face to lead the company. They chose a young man, barely in his 30s, polished in his speeches, sharp in his suits, and quick with promises that smelled like cheap perfume. His name was Ethan Price. At first, I didn't feel threatened. Titles never impressed me, results did. But soon, I realized the board wasn't just bringing in a new leader. They were phasing me out. They called me valuable history in public meetings, but behind closed doors, they whispered about outdated methods. I should have seen the storm forming, but I was blind, trusting the loyalty of the employees I had shielded for years. The first crack appeared during a Monday morning meeting. Ethan announced his grand vision for restructuring. He painted it as liberation, fewer rules, more creative freedom. The room buzzed with excitement. Faces that once looked to me for reassurance now glowed under his charm. And then came the dagger. He announced salary cuts at the top, to redistribute resources for innovation. My salary was the first example. The room erupted in applause. Applause. My people, those I had fought for, defended, and protected, clapped as my worth was slashed in half in front of everyone. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the table until my knuckles whitened. Not one of them met my eyes. Not Maria, whose job I saved when her error nearly cost us a client. Not Peter, whose late nights I defended when his wife accused him of neglect. Not Julia, whose brother's medical bills I had quietly helped cover. One by one, they lowered their heads or forced smiles at Ethan, eager to be seen on the winning side of change. I felt like a man standing at his own funeral, watching his pallbearers cheer. That evening, I drove home in silence. My wife noticed, of course. Anna has lived with me for 30 years, and she can read my silence better than any speech. Over dinner, I told her what happened. She reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and said, "Cliff, you gave them your loyalty. Don't expect them to know the value of it until it's gone." Her words cut deep because I realized she was right. Loyalty had become a language no one around me spoke anymore. But here's what no one knew. For years, I had kept records. Not out of malice, but out of necessity. Every mistake, every favor, every corner cut that I covered, I documented. Confidentially, quietly, carefully. At the time, I thought of it as insurance, a way to protect both the company and the people I cared about if something went wrong. Now, as I replayed the applause in my head, those files whispered to me. They weren't just records anymore. They were weapons. The betrayal didn't end with that meeting. 2 days later, I overheard laughter spilling from the break room. I lingered outside the door, listening. Ethan's voice rose above the rest. Cliff's old guard is over. He'll retire soon enough, and then we can run this place without his Stone Age methods. The laughter that followed included voices I recognized, voices of those I once called loyal. I walked away quietly, each step heavier than the last. In that moment, something inside me shifted. I had always believed in discipline, in patience, in earning respect. But betrayal has a way of rewriting a man's code. That night, I unlocked the drawer in my study where I kept those files. Folders stacked neatly, each labeled. I ran my hand over them slowly, like a general inspecting weapons before a battle. Every secret they thought was buried, every mistake they assumed forgotten, was right there in my hands. I barely slept after that night. By morning, my anger had cooled into something sharper, curiosity. I wanted to know just how deep this betrayal went. Did my staff really believe Ethan cared more for them than I did? Or were they simply hungry for the promises of a young man in a tailored suit? I started paying closer attention. I walked the halls not as their leader, but as an observer. And what I saw made my stomach twist. Conversations stopped when I entered a room. Eyes that once greeted me with respect now looked past me, like I was invisible. People who used to come to me with questions or problems now huddled around Ethan, treating him like a savior. The worst part wasn't their admiration for him. It was their silence toward me. Silence can cut deeper than insults. One afternoon, I overheard Julia whispering to a coworker about a promotion she expected. She said Ethan had promised her more responsibility once the old guard stepped aside. The old guard. That was me. The words stung because I remembered the night Julia broke down in my office, terrified her brother's illness would cost her job. I had written letters to the board on her behalf, arguing for flexibility. I thought she would never forget. Clearly she had. Peter, too, the man whose long hours nearly ended his marriage, now bragged in the cafeteria about how Ethan saw his potential. He never mentioned the endless nights I covered for him, never confessed that half of his presentations were polished by me before they ever reached the board. And Maria, sweet, nervous Maria. She smiled when she passed me, but it was the smile people give strangers, not mentors. I remembered how I defended her after that disastrous client meeting, when her mistake could have cost us millions. I took the blame myself, told the board it was my oversight. Now she walked past me like I was furniture. It wasn't just disappointing, it was humiliating. I felt like a man watching his children embrace a stranger as their father. But the deepest cut came a week later. I was in my office, reading through a quarterly report, when I heard Ethan's voice in the corridor. My door was slightly open, and I froze as I realized he was speaking about me. "He's outdated," Ethan said. "We'll keep him around until the next restructuring, then phase him out quietly. He won't fight. He doesn't have the energy anymore." A younger employee laughed. "So you're saying he's harmless?" "Exactly," Ethan replied. "He's history. By the time the board realizes it, he'll be gone, and we'll be running things our way." My jaw tightened. Harmless. Outdated. History. Words that turned my decades of sacrifice into nothing. For years, I had given every ounce of myself to that company. Late nights, missed anniversaries, endless flights. I gave my health, my peace, even parts of my marriage. And now, I was nothing more than a relic waiting to be discarded. That night, I told Anna everything I'd overheard. She listened quietly, her face calm but her eyes blazing. "Cliff," she said, "they don't just want you gone. They want to erase you. And if you let them, they will." Her words struck something inside me. I wasn't just betrayed. I was being buried alive. The next morning, I opened the locked drawer again. I took out one folder, the one labeled financial exceptions. Inside were years of documents. Expense reports I had approved quietly, reimbursements I had signed off on to protect my staff. Some of them were harmless, small mistakes, late filings. But others were significant. Travel expenses billed as client dinners that were really personal vacations. Misused company funds disguised as urgent projects. Ethan wasn't the first to bend the rules. My employees had been doing it under my shield for years. I flipped through page after page, each one a reminder of how far I had gone to protect them. And each page, now, was proof of how easily they had turned on me. But something else caught my attention. In the newer files, the ones from the past year, I saw patterns. Numbers that didn't add up. Payments routed through unfamiliar vendors. Consulting fees that looked suspiciously like bribes. And Ethan's name appeared more than once, signed in bold ink. I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding. It wasn't just my employees betraying me. Ethan was playing his own game, and it smelled like fraud. That night, I sat at my dining table with Anna, spreading the documents in front of her. She looked at me, then at the papers, then back at me. "Cliff, this isn't just betrayal. This is corruption." I nodded slowly. "And if the board finds out, they'll see who the real problem is," she finished. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of power return. The humiliation, the heartbreak, the betrayal. All of it began to shift into something else. Purpose. But I wasn't ready to move yet. Not yet. To strike too soon would make me look bitter, like an old man desperate to cling to power. No, I needed patience. I needed proof so solid that when I finally spoke, no one could deny me. So I began watching more carefully. Listening. Documenting. While they thought I was fading, I was recording every word, every misstep, every sign of Ethan's schemes. The deeper I dug, the more the puzzle came together. Ethan wasn't just cutting salaries to save money. He was funneling resources into shell projects, covering his tracks with flashy speeches and hollow promises. And my employees? They were blind, too busy chasing his approval to see they were helping him destroy the very company they claimed to love. Each night, I added more to the growing pile of evidence. And each night, Anna reminded me, loyalty isn't just about who you protect, Cliff. It's about knowing when to stop protecting the wrong people. The more I uncovered, the less I recognized the company I had built my life around. What was once a place of discipline and pride had become a theater of lies, with Ethan as the main actor and my employees as his eager audience. Each new piece of evidence confirmed it. He wasn't leading them into the future, he was leading them into ruin. But still I held back. Part of me wanted to believe it would fix itself, that the board would wake up, that my staff would realize what they had done. Hope can be stubborn, even in a man who's been betrayed. That hope finally died one Thursday afternoon. I was walking down the corridor when I heard raised voices coming from the conference room. Curious, I paused by the door. Through the glass, I saw Ethan at the head of the table, surrounded by the very people who once swore loyalty to me. He was holding a document in his hand, waving it like a flag. "We can't afford old methods anymore," he said loudly. "We need speed, boldness." Cliff was good for his time, but that time is over. He clings to rules, and rules are the enemy of progress. There was laughter, nodding heads. Then Julia's voice rang out. "So when will the board finally let him go?" The room erupted in chuckles. Something inside me snapped. I walked away before they could see me, my fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. I didn't feel humiliation anymore. I didn't feel sadness. I felt steel. Cold, sharp steel. Enough was enough. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Anna. I spread the evidence across the wood surface, every page like a loaded bullet. She sat across from me, her eyes firm. "Cliff," she said softly, "you've given them every chance. They've shown you who they are. What are you waiting for?" Her question echoed in my head. What was I waiting for? Redemption? An apology? Loyalty reborn? None of that was coming. "I'm done waiting," I said. My voice didn't shake this time. "If they think I'm history, then I'll write the ending myself." From that moment, the plan began to take shape. Step 1 was information. I already had files, but I needed them organized, sharpened, impossible to deny. I spent nights combing through every report, every receipt, every email. I built timelines, drew connections, highlighted signatures. Ethan's fraud wasn't a string of small mistakes. It was a system. He was funneling money into shell accounts, padding invoices, and using innovation budgets to cover his tracks. And my employees, though blind to it, had signed off on pieces of his scheme. Step 2 was protection. I knew once I moved, the storm would come for me, too. Ethan would call me bitter, accuse me of sabotage. My employees would scramble to defend themselves. I couldn't just show the evidence. I had to make sure the board saw me not as an old man clinging to relevance, but as the only one who had stayed loyal to the company's survival. Anna helped me with this part. She drafted letters, clear and professional, summarizing my findings without emotion. She reminded me to focus on the facts, not the personal betrayals. Let the truth cut them, Cliff, she said. Not your anger. Step 3 was timing. If I struck too soon, the board might dismiss me as jealous. If I waited too long, Ethan would bury his tracks. I needed the perfect moment, when suspicion had already begun to creep in. And then, like fate itself agreed with me, the moment arrived. One Friday morning, an email circulated quietly through the company. The quarterly numbers were off. Profits didn't match expenses, and no one could explain why. I saw nervous faces in the hallways, hushed whispers at desks. Ethan brushed it off in a staff meeting, saying, "Numbers always fluctuate. Trust the process." But I could see it. Doubt was seeping in. That night, I packed the files into a leather briefcase. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of the decision. Tomorrow, I would request a private meeting with the board. Tomorrow, the truth would finally come out. But before I went to war with Ethan, I had one more stop to make. I called Peter into my office late in the evening. He looked nervous, like a schoolboy caught sneaking out. "Sit," I said. My voice was calm, too calm. He sat. "Peter, do you remember 3 years ago? When you were working late, missing dinners with your wife? Do you remember who covered your mistakes so you could keep your promotion?" He swallowed hard. "You did. And now," I said, leaning forward, "you sit in rooms where they laugh about replacing me. You clap when they cut my pay. Tell me, Peter, was my loyalty worth nothing?" His face crumbled. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Finally, he muttered, "Things are changing, Cliff. Ethan, he promised us opportunities." "Opportunities," I repeated, almost laughing. "He's promising you a future he's already selling out from under you. And when the truth comes, do you know whose signatures the board will find on his reports? Yours, Julia's, Maria's, all of you caught in his net." Peter's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" I sat back, folding my hands. "You'll see soon enough. But when it happens, remember this. I warned you." He left my office pale and silent. I didn't know if he would warn the others, and frankly, I didn't care. My plan wasn't about saving them anymore. It was about saving myself, my name, my legacy. As I walked into the boardroom the next day with the briefcase in my hand, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, calm. Not the calm of surrender, but the calm of a soldier who knows the battle has finally come. Ethan was already there, flashing his trademark smile, shaking hands like a politician. He looked up when I walked in, and for a split second, I caught the smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. To him, I was just an old man dragging his pride into one last meeting. "Cliff," he said smoothly, "I wasn't expecting you." I set my briefcase down on the polished table. "No," I replied. "You weren't." The board members shifted in their seats. Some smiled politely, others looked uneasy. The quarterly numbers were on their minds. They wanted answers, and I could see in their eyes that Ethan had none. That was my opening. The chairman, Mr. Langford, cleared his throat. "Let's begin. We need to address the inconsistencies in our financial reports." Ethan leaned back, confidence dripping from him. "It's nothing unusual," he said. "Just a matter of adjusting expenses. I've already instructed accounting to recheck everything." I let him finish. Then, without a word, I unlocked my briefcase and pulled out the first stack of folders. "Adjusting expenses?" I said, my voice steady. "Is that what you call diverting company funds into shell accounts? Or paying non-existent consultants with six-figure fees?" The room froze. Ethan's smile faltered. I slid the documents across the table. Each folder was neat, organized, undeniable. These are your signatures, Ethan. Authorizations for payments that never should have existed. Cross-checked with invoices, dates, and internal reports. Every number ties back to you. A low murmur spread around the table. Eyes darted between the papers and Ethan's face. That's absurd, he snapped. You're twisting numbers to make yourself look relevant. I leaned forward. Relevant? Ethan, while you've been preaching about innovation, you've been draining this company. And the very people cheering for you. I gestured toward the employees seated at the back of the room, brought in as observers, are the ones who signed off on your lies, blinded by your promises. Julia shifted uncomfortably. Peter's face went pale. Maria lowered her eyes. They knew the documents included their approvals, their initials scribbled next to false entries. The chairman picked up a folder, scanning it quickly. His brow furrowed. Ethan, these are serious accusations. And this is your signature. Ethan's composure cracked. His voice rose. You can't take his word over mine. He's been bitter ever since I came in. He's making this up to save his career. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I pulled out the final envelope, the one I'd saved for this very moment. This isn't my word. It's the company's truth. Inside were printed emails, financial audits, even photographs of documents Ethan thought he had buried. Months of quiet observation, cross-checks, undeniable trails. I placed them in front of the board like the final pieces of a puzzle. Silence filled the room. The kind of silence that comes when the mask is ripped off and no one knows what to say. Finally, Mr. Langford looked up. His voice was cold. Ethan, step outside. Now. Ethan hesitated, his face red, but the authority in Langford's tone left no room for argument. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I sat back in my chair, letting the weight of the moment settle. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't the one on trial. The board spent the next hour reviewing the documents. I answered their questions clearly, fact by fact, never once letting emotion cloud my words. By the end, the decision was unanimous. Ethan was suspended, pending a full investigation. When the announcement was made, I looked toward the employees in the back. Their faces told a story: fear, shame, regret. Not one of them could meet my eyes. After the meeting, Julia approached me in the corridor. Her voice trembled. Cliff, I didn't know. I thought. I cut her off. You thought he cared. You thought he'd give you more than I did. But loyalty isn't about what you think you'll gain. It's about what you stand for when it matters. Her eyes filled with tears, but I walked away. I wasn't interested in apologies. Not now. The fallout was swift. By Monday, Ethan's name was in headlines. Young CEO under fraud investigation. The board released a statement promising transparency and stability. My role: interim leader to guide the company through the transition. Interim. I smiled at the word. They could call it whatever they wanted. I was back in the chair, the same chair they thought I was too old for. But this time, I wasn't carrying illusions about loyalty. My employees avoided me like shadows. In meetings, they spoke carefully, afraid their words might betray them again. Some started polishing their resumes. Others whispered about job interviews. They knew what was coming. One afternoon, Peter cornered me in the hallway. His voice was low. Cliff, I just want to say, I'm sorry. I should have stood by you. I studied him for a moment. Once, his apology would have meant something. Now it was dust. Peter, I said, loyalty isn't something you apologize for losing. Once it's gone, it's gone. He nodded, eyes heavy with regret, and walked away. At home that evening, Anna poured me a glass of wine. She sat across from me with a quiet smile. So, you did it. I exhaled slowly, the weight of weeks finally leaving me. Yes, I said. But it doesn't feel like victory. She tilted her head. Then what does it feel like? I stared at the dark red liquid in my glass. It feels like justice. Cold, necessary justice. She reached across the table, taking my hand. Sometimes that's enough. I squeezed her hand back, but in my chest, I knew the truth. I had my position again, I had my name cleared, But the people I once believed in, the ones I shielded, fought for, sacrificed for, were gone to me. They were just bodies filling desks now, shadows of the loyalty I once thought unbreakable. But maybe that was the lesson I needed. The next morning, I stood at the head of the conference room once more. The staff looked at me nervously, waiting for me to speak. I looked around slowly, letting the silence stretch. Then I said, "Loyalty isn't optional. It's not something you trade for promises or applause. It's non-negotiable. Some of you forgot that. And now you're paying the price." No one moved. No one spoke. I straightened my tie and walked out, leaving the weight of my words behind. The plan had worked. The betrayal had been exposed. But the scars would never leave. And perhaps that was the point. The weeks after Ethan's downfall passed like slow-moving storms. Every day brought new ripples of consequence, and though I had expected some of them, others surprised me. The investigation confirmed everything I had presented to the board. Ethan had been siphoning money for months, building a private fortune on the back of the company's trust. He had used fake invoices, shady contractors, and even forged signatures. Some of my employees had signed documents that supported his schemes, though they hadn't realized what they were enabling. Ignorance didn't save them from suspicion. Within a month, Ethan was gone. Not just suspended, terminated. Word spread quickly through the industry, and his name became poison. The man who had once been hailed as the future of leadership now sat in headlines as a fraud. A rising star burned out before his second year. I thought seeing him fall would bring me peace. But when I watched the news report about his exit, I didn't feel triumph. I felt tired. Justice had been served, but victory often carries the weight of everything lost along the way. The employees weren't spared from consequences either. Julia was the first to leave. Rumors said she had been questioned by the investigators about her approvals on Ethan's budgets, and though she insisted she didn't know what she was signing, the damage was done. She handed in her resignation 2 days later. I didn't say a word to stop her. Peter followed soon after. I think guilt ate him alive more than fear did. Every time I saw him in the hallway, his eyes dropped to the floor. When his resignation letter came across my desk, I signed it without hesitation. Maria tried to stay. She even approached me one morning, voice trembling, asking for a chance to prove her loyalty again. I looked at her and remembered the young woman I had once protected like a daughter. But the truth was simple: loyalty that wavers once will waver again. I reassigned her to a minor department, far from the heart of decision-making. A mercy, really, though she didn't see it that way. One by one, they drifted out of the company, searching for new jobs, new chances. But the stain followed them. In our industry, reputation spreads fast, and betrayal is never forgotten. As for me, the board reinstated me fully, though they dressed it in cautious language. Interim leadership with extended authority. They didn't want to admit they'd made a mistake putting Ethan in charge. Pride is as powerful in boardrooms as it is in people. But whether they admitted it or not, the truth was clear. I was back in control. For a while, the company felt strange. The halls were quieter, the staff more reserved. Gone were the easy smiles and loud laughter I used to hear during Ethan's reign. In their place was tension, the kind that makes every conversation careful. My presence had become a reminder, not just of discipline, but of consequences. And maybe that was necessary. Still, I wasn't blind to what had been lost. The bond one once had with my employees, the trust, the camaraderie, that was gone for good. They no longer saw me as the mentor who protected them, but as the man who held their secrets like knives. And maybe they were right. At home, Anna noticed the change in me. She watched me come back from long days, my face heavier than before. "Why do you look so burdened?" she asked one evening as we sat on the porch. "Because," I said, staring at the fading sunset, "I won the battle but lost the family. The company is mine again, but it doesn't feel like home." She took my hand. "Maybe that's the lesson, Cliff. You gave them loyalty, and they betrayed it. But you also gave them something else, proof that loyalty is worth more than applause. Even if they never understood it, you lived it. Her words settled in me like slow rain. She was right. Loyalty wasn't about whether they deserved it. It was about who I was when it mattered. And I had stayed true, even when they hadn't. Months passed, and slowly the company stabilized. New faces came in, fresh employees eager to work, but more cautious than the last group. They had heard the story. They knew who I was, what I had done, and what I stood for. Some feared me. Others respected me. A few maybe admired me. The board eventually offered me a new contract, 3 years, with full authority to restructure the company as I saw fit. I accepted, but not with the same fire I once had. Age and betrayal had changed me. I no longer dreamed of building empires. I wanted something simpler, to leave the company stronger than I found it, so no Ethan could ever rot it from within again. One evening, as I packed up my office, I opened the drawer where I had once kept the files, the secrets of my staff. Most of them were gone now, but the folders remained, silent reminders of everything that had happened. I ran my fingers over them, then pulled them out one by one. For a moment, I considered burning them, erasing the record of betrayals and mistakes. But I couldn't. They weren't just weapons, they were lessons. Lessons about trust, power, and the dangerous price of forgetting where loyalty lies. So I locked them back in the drawer, not as threats, but as reminders. The final chapter of this story came quietly, not in boardrooms or newspapers, but in a small cafe one Saturday morning. I was sipping my coffee when I saw Peter across the room. He looked older, worn down. When our eyes met, he hesitated, then walked over. "Cliff," he said softly, "I know I don't have the right, but I wanted to thank you. Not for what you did for me before. I already failed that test. But for what you did for the company. You saved it, even if it meant destroying us." I studied him for a long moment. "Peter," I said, "I didn't destroy you. You destroyed yourselves when you chose applause over loyalty." He nodded, unable to argue, and walked away. As I watched him go, I felt something strange. Not anger, not regret. Just acceptance. Now, months later, I sit at my desk, the sun setting through the tall windows of my office. The company is steady again. My name is restored. Ethan is gone, my employees scattered. And I am left with the quiet truth. Loyalty isn't optional. It never has been. It is the foundation of every bond worth keeping, every legacy worth leaving. Some may call me harsh, others may call me proud. But I know this. I gave my people everything, and when they betrayed me, I stood. I fought. I won. And as the years wind down, I will leave this place not as a relic, not as history, but as proof that loyalty, real loyalty, is non-negotiable. Thank you for spending your time with my story. Feel free to share your thoughts or reactions in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.